Hi, Vintage Guitar people. Welcome to Have Guitar Will Travel, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. With your host, me, James Patrick Regan, otherwise known as Jimmy from the Deadlies. And today I'm speaking with author, director, and Marshall amplifier collector, as well as guitarist, Peter Margolis. In our conversation, Peter tells us about his new project, a book documenting his and his business partner Brian Rank's collection of vintage Marshall amplifiers titled Collecting Loud History. Peter describes how his small collection of vintage Marshalls was destroyed in the '94 LA earthquake and how that led him to his partner in the collection, Brian Rank's, through pedal board manufacturer Bob Bradshaw. And from there, the collection grew. Peter tells us about his early collection and his band in the 80s and what Hollywood and the greater LA area were like at that time. Peter tells us about his TV and film career, starting on The Young and the Restless, then Soap, The Voice, and eventually doing a documentary on his friend and teacher Randy Rhoads. Peter talks about his first concert, Quiet Riot, and how that led to him taking lessons and becoming friends with Randy Rhoads. Peter tells us about purchasing guitar parts from Grover Jackson and his collection of Charvels, as well as his other guitars within his collection. Peter tells us about Randy Rhoads before Ozzy and his tapes of his lessons and notebooks of Randy's notes to him. And he describes a bit of the documentary he made of the pre-Ozzy relationship between Randy Rhoads and singer Kevin DuBrow from Quiet Riot. Finally, Peter tells us about how the LA fires changed his outlook on keeping his collection in the LA area and where he's planning on taking it, and plans for a volume 2 of the book. To find out more about the book and to find out how to get the book, you can go to the book's website, collectingloudhistory.com. That's collectingloudhistory.com. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and most of all, review this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And please support Vintage Guitar Magazine and all the wonderful things they do for us guitar players, because they do so many wonderful things for us guitar players. Here's my friend Peter. Hey there, Peter. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for taking this time to spend with me.
Absolutely.
How's the book going? How many signups have you have relatively?
I can tell you exactly. We've sold about 225 books.
Okay.
In the last 7 days.
Wow.
But we're doing okay.
Good.
We've been helped by Chicago Music Exchange. Immensely. The owner of the company sought me out at the NAMM show.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know who he was, and he walked up to me and he goes, "Oh my God, this book is amazing. I've never seen anything like it, and I've got to have it." And I said, "I really appreciate your enthusiasm," and he said, "No, I want a lot of them." And I was like, "Oh, great." And he goes, "I'm sorry, I'm Andrew Yonke. I own Chicago Music Exchange." It's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And I've spoken to him a half a dozen times, and he and his store and everybody in his store have been unbelievably supportive.
Right on.
They're all big Marshall fans,
of course,
and they buy and sell a lot of Marshalls. So they've been great. Norm's Rare Guitars has been great. A company called Center Staging is really helping us a lot. But, this is a grassroots, pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing that Brian and I, started our journey in '94, and after the Northridge earthquake here, when my collection was destroyed.
Oh no!
It was in a guest house where I lived at the time in Studio City, and the walls caved in.
Oh no!
And the Marshalls were all lined up, and I tell the story in the book, and all my guitars were lined up in front of them, and the guitar nicks went through every single cabinet and snapped off, and the speakers were destroyed, and the grills were destroyed, and I didn't know what to do, and so I was using a guy by the name of Bob Bradshaw, who was building pedal boards and doing all that kind of stuff, and he was my guy, and I just said, what do I do? And he said, well, lucky for you, there's a guy, a couple doors down that only restores Marshalls.
Yeah.
Nothing else. And I just thought, what are the odds of that? And so I literally went down. The guy wasn't there. I got his number. I called him up. We had a very long conversation, and I said, look, I need some help. I need these things re-grilled. I need new logos. I need corners. I got to fix these speakers. And he said, don't worry, I got you. And he goes, this is going to take a while. And then he came out to the house, and after getting everything off of the floor and into storage units and all that. I mean, it was really bad.
Yeah.
I even in the book there's some pictures of it.
Okay.
We started in, we fixed all of those. I'm not exactly sure from that point how the buying spree started, but I think at that time in 94, I had about 20 cabinets and 20 heads.
Okay.
Brian was doing this work. He was also a tech. So he was going on the road with Pat Benatar or REO or Styx or, whoever was looking for a guitar tech. He was, sort of gun for hire, Bon Jovi,
Sure.
he was Lee Roth, he worked for forever. And, he was always looking for Marshalls, and all these guys were using them. And so, little by little, somebody would say, hey, I want to get rid of this. And, Brian would say, hey, the guy's got a 7,300 watt, or, whatever from, March of 73.
Yeah.
Are you interested? He wants, $500. Yes. And I just, that's how it started.
Uh-huh.
And then, all of these opportunities came up, and so then people that would sell me stuff would call me back with things, and then I would start looking for things from stores, and then they would say, "Oh, hey, can we keep your number in case something comes in?"
Yeah.
And then there was a dozen stores that were Killer Vintage and all all
Sure.
these places were calling, and so that's how it started. Really snowballing was 94.
Okay.
Prior to that, it was just I had 10 cabinets and 10 heads, and that's what I used to play with and do shows in the LA clubs.
Yeah.
Because in the 80s, it was all about, how big your backline was.
Absolutely.
And there's a whole chapter in the book that literally I explain how those 10 cabinets were used, how they were mic'd, how the heads were used going through the pedal board. And I go through, details about, because I used, I think 6 of the 10 for stereo splits,
Oh, wow.
and for 2 cleans and 2 rhythms and 2 leads and where they were placed. And I had this crazy pedal board and rack system.
Uh-huh.
And so that's how the little sort of collection started. And then somehow between the mid 80s and the 90s, all these guys that I used to played on the, in the circuit with, who were slowly giving it up, would call and say, hey, I'm going to get rid of my half stack, I'm not doing this anymore. I went to work for my dad and I'm out of the business. I know you had a lot of Marshalls. And so, the next 10 I got like that.
Yeah.
Some of them were, nobody back then cared. These were $200 and $300 heads.
Sure. Yeah.
And everybody, it started to get rid of them because they were either, the 80s became the 90s and it wasn't cool to use, Marshalls anymore, and everybody had to have a whatever, a Fender or a, Boogie or a,
Yeah.
And you almost couldn't give them away. And so it was like, I just thought, man, these things are hand-wired. They're handmade. I gotta like supply and demand, and they've got to be worth something one day.
Sure.
And so I just started stockpiling.
Right on.
And I got a storage unit, and literally I would buy these heads, and they were in racks on the walls and in piles, and they just came to me, and I would buy probably one a week, one every 2 weeks. And some of these things that I paid $200 for, I don't know that I could put a price on them now.
Yeah.
But nobody cared back then.
Sure.
And you were tripping over red ones and purple ones and fawn ones, and it was no big deal.
Yeah.
You can't find that stuff now anywhere.
No. Yeah. Not at all. When did you buy your first Marshall? And what bands were you playing back in the 80s?
So the first one I bought, I'm going to say I was 14.
Uh-huh.
It came from a store that's, I think, now defunct. It was on the Sunset Strip. It was called Freedom Guitars.
Sure. I remember it.
And I want to say Freedom had a second store somewhere around San Diego.
Uh-huh.
I had no idea what I was buying. I just, I saw that Jimmy Page had them. I saw that Hendrix had them. I go, I want one of those.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being like a 1969 or 70 basket weave cabinet
Right on.
for $200.
Yeah.
And I think it was a 73 or 74 50 watt head.
Wow.
The whole, $450 out the door, including tax.
Wow.
But at 14, that was, a lot of car washes and a lot of dog walks and a lot of, here's your 50-cent allowance and I was, that took a long time to come up with that kind of money.
Oh, yeah,
then.
of course.
There was it's funny, I couldn't play it when my parents were home because it would, literally shake the house on one or two. Yep. There was no such thing as attenuation.
No.
So you turn it facing the wall, you put a blanket over it, you do anything you can to get this thing to not, be so bloody loud in your bedroom.
Yeah.
But, so that was my first one, and then I bought a second one, and then at 16 I had a, band with just some high school friends, and we would play, parties and stuff like that. I had 2 half stacks. I don't even think the band had a name. We were just, it was, kegger parties and, and then, let's see, after that, I went to UCLA and enrolled in the film department. And I don't think I played, I don't think I played any music while I was at UCLA. I was working, I took a job as a guy who holds the cue cards on The Young and the Restless.
Oh, wow.
So I would go there, I would go to school in the mornings, and then I would drive over to CBS Television City, and I'd write cue cards all day long.
Wow.
And they would tape the show, and I would hold the cue cards, and then I would go home and study and play the guitar and, rinse and repeat every day until I got through school. And then I took a job in 1980 for a production company called Whit Thomas Productions, and they had a brand new show called Soap.
Oh, yeah.
And I was one of the PAs on Soap, for $175 a week and all you could work, and I still wasn't, I wasn't thinking about music, and we were shooting on where the hell was it? It was up in Hollywood, Talmadge and something or other. I can't remember the old ABC. I think it's long gone.
North Hollywood.
Anyway, no, it was in sort of the east end of Hollywood. Okay. Prospect and Talmadge it was called Prospect Studios.
Okay.
And that's where Soap was shot, and we were shot across the hall from a show called Fridays.
Oh yeah, of course.
And on Fridays, they had bands and they had, all this stuff. And there was a guy who worked on Fridays. And I was working on this other show, and I would always hear this guy singing.
Okay.
And one day I said, hey, man, what do you, he goes, well, I work on the show, but I really want to be a rock star. I really want to be a singer. And I went, well, I really want to be a guitar player. I don't know what I'm doing on this TV show because, I'd literally go home every night and play the guitar and wish, that I was in a band again. And I finally one day just said, fuck it. I'm done with TV. I want to play music. And it was the 80s was just just starting. I had gone to see my very first show at a club somewhere around, I was still in college, around 77, and the very first show I ever saw at the Starwood was Quiet Riot.
Oh, right on.
With Randy Rhoads.
Yeah, of course.
And there was a flyer on the table of everybody's table at the Starwood. It said, join the Quiet Riot fan club. And so $2, and you get a T-shirt. So I joined the fan club, and I got a T-shirt, and I got an 8x10, and a newsletter, that said what everybody did in it. And he said, Randy Rhoads teaches guitar at Musonia School of Music.
Oh, wow.
It's the phone number. So I called him up. I was, 18, maybe. Started taking lessons from him for $8 an hour and did for years. And that was sort of I was in school, but I was like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so by the end of my tenure on Soap for Whit Thomas, I decided I needed to have the flexibility to be able to have all of my nights off. And, so I went to work for my father.
Okay.
By day. And my dad said, the company closes their doors at 5. You guys can, practice here at night.
Oh, right on.
And keep all your stuff in this, room that we're not using. So I ran ads in the recycler, looking for a drummer, looking for a bass player, and finally found 4 guys. And this is probably end of 80, early 81, and formed a band called Stainless Steel.
Okay.
Good and name. we were together through 85, played, Whiskey, Troubadour, Country Club, I don't know, and a lot of the smaller, places.
Sure.
And, worked our way up from Sunday night at midnight to, Friday night at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And just did the whole, plastered flyers everywhere and
Yep.
got all our friends and eventually got, enough people to come and see. And I was part of that whole 80s, gunslinger, guitar player things. I took what I learned from Randy and, what I learned listening to, Zeppelin records and Robin Trower records and anybody that I could figure out what they were doing and practiced every second that I could. And I always had a guitar in my backseat of my car and, I would just... and then, I was convinced that was going to be my life.
Uh-huh.
And I bought enough gear at that point to have the big back wall of Marshalls.
Yeah.
And, I would roll into these clubs with literally 5 stacks. And you could fit it on the Troubadour. You could fit it on the Country Club stage. They were big enough.
Yeah, those are big stages.
We had a drum riser that spun around.
Wow.
And, we had all the stuff. I mean, we weren't Wasp, but, we had a show.
Yeah.
And, eventually, March 15th, the Ides of March, 1985, we had just come off of we had some gig like the weekend prior that was shitty. It was, I don't remember, not a great turnout. It was raining or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And that night, the singer walks in and he goes, "Hey man, so I just got an offer from another band and I'm going to take it."
Wow.
And the bass player goes, "Well, if he's leaving, I'm leaving."
Oh my God.
And I sat and I stared at the drummer and I went, "Hey, this is where we were 5 years ago."
Yeah.
It was me and you and looking for 2 guys. And, I don't want to start over.
Yeah.
I was 25 or 26 years old, broke, working for my dad for $5 an hour. And I just thought, this is not what I want my life to be.
Yeah.
And, everybody that I knew at that time and was friends with, nobody had plan B.
Uh-huh.
Everybody will tell you it was this or nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll go work in a gas station or I'll go whatever, but I'm going to play the guitar the rest of my life. Because of how I was raised and who I was raised by, there was never going to not be a plan B.
Yeah.
My parents were going to make sure of it.
Yeah.
And as much as I resisted, I finally just went, I was not raised like this. I can't live in my car. I can't just do this. And so I called my brother up, who was a big hotshot director in show business, and I just said, "Uncle, I give up. I white flag. I surrender. I can't do this." And I went to work at Dick Clark Productions.
Oh, wow.
In 1985, May of 85, as a PA, starting all over.
Yeah.
I met a lot of great people, and within a year, I had joined the Directors Guild of America, May of 86, and I got my first job as a Directors Guild member as a stage manager on a TV show called Putting on the Hits.
Oh, yeah.
That began my new life as a Directors Guild member. I've been in the DGA for 39 years.
Sure.
I'm very, very, very fortunate to have the resume that I do.
Yeah.
And been incredibly lucky. So that's sort of my life, and that has allowed me to purchase what I've purchased and to pay for these things.
Yeah.
I'm not doing the kind of buying I used to because the cabinets I was paying $300, $400, $500, $600 for are now 10 times that.
Yeah.
So I'm really cautious about what I buy.
Yeah, of course.
I'm at a point where our house is bursting at the seams, with stuff. And my wife says, where are we going to put it?
Yeah.
We're kind of, we're sort of done. And the book was partially to document the collection.
Sure, of course.
The primary reason for the book was that as Brian and I were accumulating these things and restoring them and fixing the torn grills and fixing the broken logos and fixing the broken corners. And, in some cases, I bought many of them that the Tolex was stripped off.
Oh, wow.
And so it's like, well, this is starting over with literally a box.
Yeah.
We would do all this work and then we would document what we did. And, we went through like every Marshall book and it's like, there's nothing about how to preserve these.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you have a Ferrari and you race that Ferrari and that Ferrari gets in an accident, you don't take that Ferrari to the junkyard.
No.
You restore that Ferrari.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's sort of the same with these things, with these old pieces. They're now a part of history.
Yeah.
Many of them can't be made like they were made in the past because, especially the heads, the OSHA says, no, you can't use Bakelite parts, and no, you can't wind transformers like this, and no, you can't do this, and because it's, unsafe or whatever. Well, but that's what makes these old things great and sound like.
Yes, exactly.
And sound awesome. And so we realized that by going through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these and accumulating all this knowledge about preserving this mark and this brand, that there was knowledge that we had acquired that's not in any books.
Yeah, of course.
And, having every single circuit board that was, produced in 1973 or 1967 or whatever that's in it, it's like anybody can open this book. And the point of it, besides documenting the collection and preserving, and doing the preservation work or the restoration work, was that while I was searching these things out on Reverb and eBay and Craigslist and, all of these places, I would see these ads that would say, basket weave cabinet for sale, $2,000 or, whatever. And there'd be a picture of a cabinet that wasn't a basket weave.
Yeah, exactly.
Or there would be no photo.
Yeah.
And then I would end up at the guy's place and it wasn't what it was because he didn't understand what basket weave meant.
Yes, exactly.
Or plexi.
Yeah.
Or any of the term, he just heard these things and went, oh, I must have a plexi. It's 1973. It's like, no, you don't, because they weren't produced after the middle of 69.
Yeah.
So I realized that the information about what you have is not necessarily readily available.
No.
So now you can look through our book starting in 64 and ending in 1980, and you can see exactly what you have. If you want to pull the chassis out and go, oh, mine matches this.
Yeah.
Mine has 4 numbers and a letter C.
Yeah.
What does that C mean? Oh, okay. Well, let me go to this chapter, 1971, and let me, it's an E. Let me go to 73. So anyway, actually C would be, E is 73, D is 72, C is 71. Anyway, so you can look in the book and see what you have.
Yep.
And, if you have something that's highly modified, well, how do I know? Well, I've got the same thing that this one has, but here's a stock one from 73. Oh, this one's been changed a lot.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do I tell if I have a transformer change? Well, it should have a sticker and these numbers, and it should say, Dagnall on it, or should say, whatever, and it doesn't. So maybe my transformer's changed.
Yep.
Let me flip it over and look at, the color of the wires and, all that. So it is sort of a guide to tell you what it is you have.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a chapter in the back of the book that's 50 pages long about parts.
Uh-huh.
This is what screw would have been used in this year.
Mm-hmm.
And when did corners start being used in cabinets, and how were they attached? With flat rivets, with round rivets, with Phillips screws, with flathead screws, with brass screws, with steel screws, and every year it was different.
Sure.
So if you look at something that's untouched and it's got, a round rivet on the corner, well, that's going to narrow down your cabinet to a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then, you can start to look through the book and see the cabinets with round rivets and go, oh, I have this.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that was that and the preservation of the book, of the mark, and to document a collection of this size was what drove us to do the book. And the other thing I said to Brian sometime around 2018, I go, hey man, we ain't 40 years old anymore. We need to get on this, because who knows,
Yeah.
This was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And, I just said, we've talked about it for years. Let's just pull the trigger. I had been involved in books before because of that whole Randy Rhoads thing that I did.
Okay.
And so there's 2 books that I produced, a Randy Rhoads book and a Quiet Riot book.
Oh, right on.
So I knew what the process was.
Yeah.
But I had never done anything of this magnitude.
Uh-huh.
The other books I did were 200 and 300 pages. They were hardbound, but like the printer that we used was out of business, and enough time had passed where it's literally like starting over.
Yeah.
And I said to Brian, listen, the guy who designed the Randy Rhoads books, if he doesn't sign on to do this, if I can't convince him to do this Marshall book, honestly, I don't want to do the book.
Uh-huh.
Because I know what his design will look like.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know what his layout will look like. And he had since retired from doing that, and he would work at Universal his whole life, as a designer. And I just called him up and I said, "Hey, man," and he's like, "No way." And I said, "Wait, I haven't even offered you anything."
Yeah.
And I just said, I don't want to do this book with anyone else, and I think this is really important to do.
Yeah.
Passion project. I'll pay you. I know you're retired. You could use a little extra cash. And I said, but this is really important. And he finally said, okay.
Yeah.
And I knew at that point that we had it.
Yeah.
And if you've looked at the book, I provided the words and the amps. Brian provided all the technical stuff that he's more savvy than I am with, really into the weeds with, how many threads are in a T-nut, and things like that.
Wow.
And the parts chapter in the back is his baby, because, he can tell you literally every single thing about the construction and the parts that they use to put this together.
Uh-huh.
So, between that and between, my collection and my writing the stories, and Denny's ability to take all this information and craft it into something that's manageable and something that is, somebody can look at and read, and it all makes sense. It really, although Brian and I get the credit for writing this book and I get the credit for the collection, it's really Peter, Brian, and Denny.
Yeah, okay.
Without him, this book would have been, a newspaper.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't look like it does. So, all credit goes to him, because he is the one that designed this masterpiece. And then beyond him, we have a printer. I miraculously found the guy that printed the Randy Rhoads book. He no longer worked at the same company. The company was out of business.
Uh-huh.
Somehow, Denny, through someone else, got this guy's number, and we reached out to him, and we told him what we're doing, and he said, "Yeah, I'm at a new place. I'm at this printing company in Sylmar. Come on out." And we went out there, and it was like, holy shit, this is it.
Uh-huh.
It's 20,000 square feet of printing presses, and they do T-shirts, and they do hats, and they do everything that's got printing on it, and embroidery and all this crazy stuff. So we now had a printer.
Yeah.
And we found a web designer, and we had a couple photographers, and it's like, okay, we have all the ingredients. We don't have a publisher. We don't have a distributor. Usually I called Hal Leonard.
Oh, really?
And I got a guy on the phone, and I have a friend who's put out some books on Hal Leonard, and he gave me their number, and he said, yeah, call these guys, and I think they'll be interested in something like this. And I had a conversation with the guy, and he said, here's how we work. We get 85%, you get 15%, and we do all this stuff. And I went, well, okay, no. It's going to be the other way around. I get 85%, you get 15%. And he said, well, that won't work for us. And I said, then we're not working together.
Yeah.
And I just realized at that point, I'm not willing to give up ownership.
Mm-hmm.
because it means giving up control.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know what the book has to look like, and I didn't want an editor saying this has got to be 400 pages.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody's going to read a 600-page book. And I don't want anybody editing the stories. Brian and I and Denny were our own editors. And, we went through these things over and over and over and over again. Yeah. Do we really need this story? Do we really need this line? Do we really need this anecdote? Things like that. Yeah. And so we got it down to a point where we were comfortable. And, everybody was happy. And my wife read it. Brian's wife read it. People who are not Marshall connoisseurs,
sure.
Just to does this make sense? Does this story track?
Yeah.
Can you follow it? Forget the names of the tubes. Forget any of this stuff. Does the story track?
Uh-huh.
And so at the end of the day, after everybody looked through it and said, yes, this is great. I knew we had an edited piece. Uh-huh. I knew it was large, but it tells the story and it does what it was intended to do. Yeah. And I've said to a lot of my friends who are not Marshall people, it's a book about Marshalls, but moreover, it's an art piece.
Exactly. I was just going to say that.
These images pop off of the pages and they're gorgeous, and these circuit boards are gorgeous, and the shots of the tubes are gorgeous, and it's really a beautifully crafted book.
Yeah. And,
the pages are all thick and glossy and there isn't a page in this that's not colored with some beautiful picture and there's stories all throughout. It's not a technical manual.
Yeah.
It's how are these acquired, where, from whom, at what time, why. And I think anybody that will tell you the four most important words when you're doing something like this are tell me a story.
Yeah.
There's going to be a handful of people that are going to want to open it up and go, I need the part number, I need the serial number, I need the blah, blah, blah. The rest of the world wants to know a story.
Yeah, of course.
And so I knew that it had to be colorful, it had to be bright, it had to be personal. There had to be a lot of stuff about me and Brian in it.
Yeah.
It can't just be about this gear, albeit beautiful. And if you look at a Marshall, they got it right the very first time, even though they've changed the logo a number of times.
Yeah. It's
aesthetically a beautiful piece.
Absolutely. Okay.
Anyway, I know I've talked for 20 minutes without shutting up. So
That's okay.
And I hope in that I answered your question.
No, you did. So you mentioned in '94 the earthquake. What guitars did you lose in that earthquake?
Well, at that time, I was not a vintage guitar collector.
Okay.
Brian was the one who took me to Norman's Rare Guitars.
Oh, okay.
Around 95 or 96. I did not own a vintage guitar. Well, I did, but unbeknownst to me, I had a 52 Les Paul.
Oh, wow.
And it had been painted black, and it had been, carved out to fit, a couple DiMarzios. And again, because in the 70s or 80s, nobody gave a shit about these Les Pauls.
Yeah.
You wanted a humbucker in where there used to be a, P90.
Exactly.
And, you didn't want this gigantic bridge that was used in 52. And, so that's what happened. Anyway, so that guitar went through one of my Marshalls and the headstock snapped off.
Okay.
Every other guitar that I had, I have sort of an interesting crazy guitar story. Because of Randy Rhoads and, because of my relationship with him, when he taught, he had his 74 Les Paul and he had the Polka Dot B in about the last year of lessons.
Okay.
So he got that through Carl Sandoval, who was working for Grover Jackson in the San Dimas shop.
Oh.
So I drove out to the San Dimas shop, not knowing anything, just like, hey, man, my friend Randy said, I met Grover and his wife at the time. They were running this shop, which was, a small warehouse, which had formerly been like a public storage locker. I mean, it was really down and they had a couple guys working there, and he goes, well, we're selling these guitars. We're sort of making them for people. We're not really a company per se, but, what are you looking for? I said, I want to get my first Strat style guitar. And, so he literally had stacks of bodies and stacks of necks that were second. And they would have, the bodies would have a knot in them, or the necks, weren't whatever. They had a little imperfection and you couldn't sell them.
Yeah.
So he goes, well, you can get a body for $50 and a neck for $75 and just find a pickup. And, he goes, I'll sell you a bridge. And so I bought a bunch of parts. And so I had $200 or $300 worth of parts, and I made my first Charvel style guitar. So by the time I was done buying these bodies and necks, I was able to have him make me a bunch of them. Mm-hmm. So I have 18 Charvels from 79 through 83.
Right on.
Again, they were $200 or $400 guitars.
Yeah.
Now, they're insane amounts of money, and these were all Grover would give me a receipt for bodies and stuff, and of course I had everything.
Yeah.
And then years later, when I did the Randy Rhoads thing, I called him up because he had, he made the first, Jackson prototype, which was Randy's white guitar.
Yep.
And so I interviewed him for the movie that I did in the book, and we reconnected, and, he's like, hey, you still got all those bodies and necks? It's like, yeah, I do. And they're all now, finished guitars that he had painted some of them.
Uh-huh.
I had another guy, paint some, but, it's part of my guitar collection.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I went crazy with Les Paul Juniors and specials, and I had to have a Strat from every year, and whatever. And
custom
so I've
colors too.
I have what do I have? I have a 72 blue. I've got a 70 or 69 white. I've got a 68 red. I have a lot of colors. I have about 30 Strats, something like that.
Wow.
I love that guitar.
Yeah.
And again, like the Marshalls, I don't know that I could buy these.
Oh yeah.
Most of my stuff I bought in the 90s.
Yeah.
I would go into Norm's and I would go, okay, I just did a big job. I've got a couple $1,000s left. And he goes, well, here's a 54 Junior that just came in. It's $2,000. What is the 54 Junior now? 20 grand?
Probably, yes.
It was $2,000.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, it's only got one pickup and two knobs. But he goes, I think this one's going to be one that you're going to want to just put away in the alligator case. And so I did.
Right on.
And I would just go to Norm and say, what should I get? And he goes, well, here's this, And then his book came out, and I saw a bunch of guitars in the book, and Norm took me to the warehouse, and I bought a 74 and a 75 white Les Paul, like Randy's.
Oh, right on.
It had never been played.
Yeah.
Were in their cases with all the tags.
Yeah.
I bought some other cool stuff from his warehouse.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think I bought a guitar, maybe one in the last year or two. At some point, it's just like, enough. I have enough.
Yeah.
And Norm always says to me, you just need one more. And it's like, exactly. you tell that to my wife.
Do you actually own anything of Randy's?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
So when I was taking lessons from him, I had my little realistic tape player and cassette, and I would walk in and I would hit record on my cassettes for every one of my lessons.
Yeah, right on.
So I have his voice.
Okay.
I have the books where he would literally write in the book, this is the scale, and he'd circle this is the third, and this is the fifth, and this is,
Yeah.
So I have books and books of his handwriting.
Right on.
I have the Quiet Riot records, which I brought in, and I asked him to sign.
Okay.
I have an 8x10, which I asked him to sign. I said, I feel weird about doing this, but, he's like, I don't mind.
Yeah.
He was a star locally. This was before Ozzy.
Sure, yeah, no, I understand that.
He lived with his mother. He drove his Scirocco, and he was just a guy.
Yeah.
But I just thought, one day this dude's going to be somebody, and I'd love to have his autograph. And, I felt weird asking him, but now, so do I have anything of his? Yes, I have his handwriting on all these music books. I have his handwriting on the records and the 8x10.
Yeah.
I don't own a guitar that was his.
Okay.
They all belong to his sister. Owns all of them.
Okay.
And they have his Marshalls. I have pictures of all of them.
Yeah.
When I was doing the movie, she let me have access to everything.
Right on.
And I spent a day with his guitars and a day with his amps, and but the books and the things, all the things that he signed, and the recordings of his voice, I have.
Yeah. And the name of the Randy Rhoads book and movie, what's that?
Well, it's a very long story, and I'll just say he and I were friends.
Yeah.
We spoke outside of lessons.
Sure.
He came to see my band. I came to see Quiet Riot. I'm very close with his fiance.
Okay.
I'm very close with all of his friends. I did not have a great relationship, unfortunately, with his brother and sister.
Yeah.
And they run his estate.
Yeah.
So the movie came out. You can get the Quiet Riot movie somewhere online.
Yeah, I've seen it.
You can get the books. Well, the version that you may have seen on Amazon, or did you see it before? Because they re-edited it, the one that came out on Amazon.
I watched it when it first came out. I don't know which.
Okay, so that's the one I did.
Okay, good.
I'm actually in it.
Okay.
But that was the one that I was the executive producer. I mean, I saw every single cut we did. I oversaw, all this stuff. It was a well-crafted movie. It was basically the story of Kevin and Randy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, we couldn't tell the story about what happened when he joined Ozzy.
Yeah.
Because of all that went on prior to that.
Sure.
So I was limited to talking about his years from birth through the end of Quiet Riot. Yep. And it was more a relationship about two friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of what the movie was about. I had to figure out a different spin on it.
Yeah.
I thought that little movie was good.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of the two books. I was very happy to have a relationship with him. He was a good human.
Yeah.
It's terribly tragic what happened to him, and
absolutely.
Moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. What was Hollywood like? Pre the hair band era.
Well, the bands I guess hair bands would have been like 84, 83.
83. When Motley Crue started, which was 81, but they didn't really. It didn't take effect until 83 or 84.
Yeah. It was bands like Quiet Riot, Smile, Stormer. There was this great trio, a la carte.
Okay.
And everything basically centered around the Starwood and the Whiskey and Gazzarri's.
Uh-huh.
Within that 2 or 3 blocks. I mean, the Roxy, even though it's right in the middle of all that, the Roxy was, sort of catering to acts that were already signed.
Okay.
Other places were catering to acts that were unsigned, sort of local heroes. So these guys were all, there was like rock or hard rock nights interspersed with new wave and punk nights.
Yeah.
Because at that time, new wave and punk, they would have, new wave would be Monday night, and it would be the Zeros and the, Pearl Harbor and the Explosions and, a all these different bands like that. And then the next night would be, the Circle Jerks and, a couple punk bands. And then the next night it would be Quiet Riot and a la carte and Snow, with Carlos Cavazo.
Yeah.
And so there was, you were relegated to certain nights where, whatever your thing was, if you were new wave, then you would hang out, on the Monday nights or whatever.
Yep.
I remember specifically Friday nights were, the music that I liked.
Sure.
That was, the hard rock. And I have nothing against new wave and punk, certainly, but it just wasn't my thing.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what it was like. The hair thing hadn't happened yet. The spandex. It was sort of like those bands took things from Bowie, Sweet, and it was that sort of glam, but it hadn't exploded into the the hair, what the hair metal was.
Yeah.
It was sort of on the fringes of that.
Yeah.
And then some bands, like Van Halen, just went out in their jeans and their t-shirts and, just, blew it up.
Yeah, exactly. How often do you get called to for your amps to be in a video shoot or a TV show or that kind of thing?
Not much anymore.
Okay.
Years ago, a lot.
Okay.
Brian actually sort of cornered the market on that because he had so many pieces of gear that we would use pieces and parts from to fix our other stuff. So he would end up with like a shell. And so he would build this prop gear. And that's what was used a lot of times. Like if somebody said, hey, we need, 5 stacks of Marshalls. Well, what if they're empty?
Yep.
I mean, how many are you going to really use?
Exactly.
Well, we're not. We're just going to put a boogie behind them and, whatever. Well, then we'll just send you the props.
Yeah.
My stuff was used a lot on Arsenio Hall show.
Okay.
Nelson, rented a couple I don't remember all the acts, but center staging, I think, was Johnny Caswell and Jan Parent back then. And these were guys who used to work at SIR.
Okay.
I worked in TV with them. They knew about my collection, and they had like Arsenio Hall was one of their first gigs. They would say, hey, this band wants Marshalls, and we don't have enough.
Yeah.
And so I would go, here, $50 a day per cabinet, and $100 a day per head, and they would come with the truck, and they would, take some. And at one point, I remember giving them some white stuff, and the client said, "Never mind, we want red." And so they said, "We'll fix it." And they took a roll of red gaffer's tape, and that was the last time. And I got the stuff back, and my white cabinets were covered in red, duct tape, and it took a long time to get all that residue off.
Sure.
With a toothbrush and just soap and water and trying to get all this gunk off. And I went, no more. I'm not loaning this stuff out. It's too precious.
Yeah. Is there anything you're still looking for out there in the world?
Yes. So the day before the NAMM show, there's a whole section in our book about fawn pieces. So back in the day, nobody wanted fawn. It was a funky tan color, and they just sat and I want the red one. Or I want nobody wanted fawn. And for some reason now, you don't ever see them. When you do see them, they're usually in shit condition. So the day before NAMM, or 2 days before, I'm sitting on the computer, and a friend of mine sends me this Facebook Marketplace ad for 2 fawn cabinets.
Wow. So
I open up the ad. My wife's walking, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't. NAMM's tomorrow. They're coming to get my gear. I can't deal with this right now. And I go, shit, because you never see these things. These were in really good condition.
Yeah.
So my wife goes, why don't you pick those up? You only have 1 fawn cabinet. And I was like, really? She goes, yeah, just get them. I know how much you love the fawn, and thankfully the stuff in the book is my cabinet is, but the rest of it's all Brian's.
Yeah.
So I call this guy. His name is Lee, and I said, I'm interested in the cabinets, and when can I get them? And he said, he's thinking that I'm going to try to grind them down for the price.
Yeah.
These things. When I see something and somebody says it's X, I just go, okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't like it when people do it to me. If they decide the price is $2,500, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So he was sort of stunned that I didn't want to, start negotiating with him. And I said, no, are the speakers, do they all work? Are they all what you say they are? And he goes, yeah. There's, you can see the picture. And I said, yeah, but it's, hard to tell.
Yeah.
Anyway, he shows up the day that all of my stuff was taken down to NAMM. Center Staging came in with a big truck, and they took everything. He shows up that day. Sure enough, these cabinets were great.
Yep.
Brings them into the garage. They're 2 fawn cabinets. Now I have 3. No fawn heads, to answer your question. I don't own a fawn head, so what am I looking for? 3 fawn heads.
Okay.
And this guy says to me, hey, are you going to be at NAMM? And I went, yeah. And he goes, oh, I'm a Marshall and Dorsey. And I went, wait a minute. You're a Marshall? I said, I'm going to be in the Marshall booth with my book and my stuff. He goes, oh, I'm playing there.
All right.
Turns out the guy who sold me these cabinets out of the blue is a Marshall and Dorsey. His name's Lee Downer.
Okay.
He's in a punk band. Marshall gives him stuff. And when he's not doing that, he's a dealer. He buys and sells gear.
Oh, right on.
And it was just, and sure enough, the first day, there he is. And it was just dumb luck. So to answer your question, the long answer to your short question is, I would like to find some fawn heads.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. There is a JTM 45 that I don't have, and it was made in just a little window, and hopefully one day I'll find one of those. The badging is a little bit different than I have a lot of them.
Yeah.
I have the coffin logos and the block logos, but there's one in between that I don't have. So I'll get my hands on one by the time we do volume 2 of this book. I have people looking. I have a guy in England, actually, that I've bought a lion's share of my collection from.
Okay.
And strangely, a lot of Marshalls never left England.
Wow.
And there's a lot in Ireland. And so many of the great pieces that I have been shipped to me from this guy has found them.
Right on. What's next? What's next for you? Volume 2?
In terms of the book or in terms of...
toward life.
We just went through the fires.
Yes.
The fires were, without exaggerating, maybe 1,000 feet from our door.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
We were evacuated for the Woolsey fires. We were evacuated, and about a year ago, my wife and I bought a house in Washington.
Oh,
I'm born and raised in L.A.
Uh-huh.
My whole family, everybody was here.
Yep.
But L.A. is not the L.A. that it was in the 60s and 70s, unfortunately. It was the greatest place ever. You had the mountains, you had the oceans, you had everything. And it was like the Beach Boys said, fun, 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 until your daddy took the T-bird away.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore here. And, you're stepping over homeless people, and, there's just everything is a regulation. And, we had homeowners insurance taken away from us last year, so we had to go to the California Fair Plan. And so we bought this house in Washington, and I shipped up about half of my collection, which is now currently residing in Washington.
Okay.
And the next thing for me in June is the rest of the collections going up there.
Okay.
Because I can't be a sitting duck here again.
No.
And I literally, when we told we're being evacuated, from the time that we got the, Amber Alert and the fire trucks were now on the street, and then police and everything, on bullhorns screaming at everybody to leave. I'm literally running up and down my stairs because this was like a week before NAMM.
Yeah.
With heads up and down the stairs into my car and into my wife's car and and I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to lose my collection. And I got a strap under each arm and huffing and puffing to try to shove everything into the car. My wife has the dogs and, food and clothes. And we drove away from the house, and I thought, oh my God, my life's work is going to go up in flames. Thank God it didn't.
Yes.
But I literally said to her that night, never again.
Yeah.
This stuff is leaving this house, and it's going to where it rains every single day.
Yeah.
And, we live in an area that's gated.
Yeah.
And there's, you can't get into the track that we live without passing through the guards and, all that stuff.
Yep.
They drive around to make sure that everybody's car, and it's pretty militant, but I feel safe.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's where everything is right now, or most of it. The rest of it's going up in probably May or June.
Uh-huh.
So that's next on the plate. But also getting the books out.
Yeah.
They start printing next week.
Oh, right on.
We've promised everybody that, we're going to be shipping them in May.
Yep.
So we have to keep good to our promise.
Yeah,
I don't want to, push this thing out. I have a conversation with Marshall next week about how they want to get involved, or do they want to get involved, but we're looking for distribution.
Sure.
They have been incredible. I mean, they were one person nicer than the next at the Marshall booth. They've since called. What can we do? Our CEO wants to talk to you. I mean, it was literally, they've been incredible.
Yeah.
And so that's next on the plate. The move is next on the plate.
Yeah.
I go back to work in May. I work on a show called The Voice.
Oh, cool.
I'm the associate director.
Okay.
And, they shoot 5 months a year.
Uh-huh.
And so I do that, and I do I just do the Grammys.
Okay.
I do the CMA Awards and a few other shows. So I sort of work part time now.
Sounds
I'm not a young one like I used to be. I mean, the book is really answering all the emails and fielding all the questions and doing great things like this. And there have been other people that have asked us, and we're doing a few others, and just to try to keep people interested in the story and drum up some business, and help the Marshall brand in any way we can. Yeah. I was in Vintage Guitar Magazine years ago. There's a picture of, I think in the early 2000s, I lined up all my Marshalls in my backyard, and I got on my roof and I took a picture.
Uh-huh.
It ended up in the magazine.
Oh, right on.
And I think at one point I took a picture of my Charvel collection, and it ended up in one of those little
in the back
things.
Yeah.
So I've been in it a couple times.
Right on. So Collecting Loud History is your website where you can order the book.
Yeah, the book is called Collecting Loud History.
Okay.
The website is called collectingloudhistory.com.
Yeah. Yep.
You can order the book there. You can order T-shirts there.
Yep.
And, ultimately, we hope to print, other T-shirts and hats and sweatshirts and volume 2 of the book and volume 3. And our hopes are to continue.
Yep.
With the support of everybody, we hopefully will be able to do that.
Right on. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you.
Likewise, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Likewise, Peter. It's been great. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And the book is, I've seen the book. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care.
You too. Thanks for listening to Have Guitar Will Travel. You can catch up on all the things I'm doing at thedeadlies.com. And I'm on all the social media platforms as well. And please support Vintage Guitar and all the wonderful things they do, because they do many, many wonderful things for us guitar players. Thanks. Please subscribe. Please tell a friend. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.